At this point, you should be able to create a basic mission including an orbit, a destination component, or a path, and ideally fly it using your drone. Now our next job is to start to get the camera of your drone looking in the right direction. So if I go back to the list of questions, I'm going to focus on the third question and to a certain degree the fourth question about when certain camera movements will occur. We're going to address camera settings and commands in the next video, and I'm going to start by focusing on the path motion component. I'm going to address moving the camera and destination components later. So a heads up, this is going to start simple, but it can honestly get complex as we start trying to do more powerful camera motions. This is the beauty of Dronelink. You can do simple things easily, but the power is not far away. Here we have a basic path with 4 waypoints and an approach. I haven't done very much to change the altitude. Everybody's staying at 100 feet. The goal right now is how to make the camera change. And let's start by saying that I want to put a point of interest right here. So the simplest thing to do to create a point of interest is to right-click where you want the point of interest and then select point of interest and marker. And it will drop the point of interest wherever the right click was, and it'll put a marker at the closest point in the path. Now, let's say that we want the camera to start looking at the center of this rotary here, right at the beginning, right when it gets to the approach. So I can drag this marker over to this point where I want it. So at this point, it's going to fly here, it's going to start looking at this point, and it's going to fly the entire mission now looking at that point. So at this point, let's add one more thing. Let's say that instead of having it look at the base at 0 feet, we actually want it to maybe look 30 feet up in the air, kind of maybe a little bit higher in the circle. More typically, you're doing this on a building or a tower. You want to be looking at a higher point. I want to go not to the marker, but the point of interest. So I can click here. This will bring up the point of interest. I can name this point of interest if I wanted to. I could just maybe call this circle number 1 if I want to. But here's your altitude offset. So I can set this to 30 feet. Now when it comes here, instead of looking at 0 feet, it's actually going to look at 30 feet in the air. So let's add a second point of interest. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about interpolation. So I'm going to go here to this other circle. I'm going to do point of interest and marker again. It's going to create a second point of interest, a second marker, and let's put this second marker to start acting right here. And for the sake of it, let's just keep it at 0 feet. So as of right now, we're taking off from our approach, we're flying to here, we're going to start looking at this point. Now the question is, when does it start transitioning to look to this other location? That's what this interpolation is all about. So there are 3 settings on this. There's interpolation none, interpolation linear, and interpolation curved. Let's start with interpolation none. I'm going to set interpolation none. So what this is going to do, it's going to fly to number 1, and it'll stay at number 1 all the way until it gets to number 2. And then number 2, it'll kick off to this location. So let's watch that. Let's pull up the mission preview. We drag it over, and we see the drone come out. And once it gets to number 1, boink, kicks over to look at that circle. Now you can see that as I march along here, it's staying looking at that location all the way until it gets to number 2, and then it kicks over to the other circle until the end of the mission. So let's say now that we want to have it transition a little bit smoother between 1 and 2. We want to set interpolation not on 1 because 1's is already there, but on 2. So I select the second marker and I select interpolation, and let's start by just selecting linear. Now what it's going to do now is once it gets to 1, it's going to slowly equally start transitioning from 1, this circle, over to this circle. Let's watch it do that. So there it comes again, comes out. It looks at the first one, and you can see it almost immediately starts transitioning over to look at the second one. And then by the time it gets to the second one, it's already looking there. And then it'll start going around. Now, you can actually customize how quickly that occurs. If I close down mission preview, and I go back to my marker, and I see this linear. If I change linear to curved, and then I open up the advanced settings, you can see this little line here. This will tell how quickly it goes from looking at the first one to the second one. So let's just say we can actually move this. You can see that what it's going to do, it's going to stay on the first point of interest longer and then quickly transition over to the second. Let's watch this one. So comes out. You can see that it's at this point, it's still looking at that first point of interest. And then once it gets to kind of the middle, boom, it kicks over and starts looking at the second one. These markers are a little bit close together, so it's not as noticeable. At this point, I'm going to show you another way to control the camera. So we're going back to the original mission that we had. Let's say, for example, that instead of having it look at a specific location, we wanted to have the drone go along it face a direction, perhaps 90 degrees to the direction of the path. We go over here, we add a marker. The marker right here. We can do marker of drone heading. Now, drone heading, we can set the drone heading to be either based upon the northwest, east, south, or the path. If we do on path, this means that based upon the path that it's going, this is 90 degrees to the path. In other words, this is going to face to the right. So if we look at this preview, what it's going to do, it'll fly to this point, and then it'll face looking to the right the entire mission. Let's take a look at that. Comes out, gets to that first waypoint, kicks right, and it'll stay looking to the right the whole way. So again, this is a good way to kind of do a trucking shot or a follow shot like that. For the sake of comparison, let's just say that we went back into our marker and we changed it from path to north. Now it should be facing east the whole way, regardless of the path direction. There's east, and regardless of where it is, it always faces toward the east. Now I'm going to show you one other thing that you can do to help define where the drone looks, and that's the use of the simulated drone. I took that original mission, I deleted a couple of the waypoints at the end just because I wanted to add one using the simulated drone. So let's say that I want it again, I want to really size up exactly what it's looking at the circle. I want to know the angle, I want to make sure I know what I want to see if the horizon's in the shot, I want to have some good information as to what's going on. If I right click anywhere and I click on simulated drone, my preview screen pops up, but this is not a preview of the mission, but a preview of this guy, this little simulated drone. And I can drag this around wherever I want. This is the field of view, and I can drag this to wherever I want. So I can say, let's say, I want the drone to be about here, and I want it to look at that circle. I can also drag and drop it now I'm actually in the preview screen. Look around and do this. This little ellipse over here, if I click here, I can change the altitude of the drone this way. Okay, I can change the type of drone it is because the field of view of these different cameras is a little bit different. All right, so let's pull this down. Okay. A quick comment on this, that if you see this curved area, this shows that the horizon is in view. If I extended this out too close, you can see that that curved becomes a triangle, which means that the horizon's not in view. So it's kind of a useful thing. So let's say that I want to make sure that I want to do this shot here, but I want to make sure that the horizon's in view. So I can see this, the horizon's definitely in view. Now what can I do now that I've kind of mapped this point in space? Back over here to the preview screen on the right hand side, there is a plus. And if I click on the plus, I can say new waypoint and marker. What it does here is it drops in another waypoint and a marker with the drone direction, the gimbal direction, the drone direction facing at this. It's not a point of interest, but it's actually going in the drone direction. You can actually see it if I pull this up. Here's that marker, and you can see what it did here is it created a marker with an altitude. This is the altitude that it's flying to. It's moving. It's actually changed the altitude of the drone. It changed the drone heading and the gimbal pitch. One last time, let's look at the preview for this. Let's fade back a little bit so you can kind of see what happened here. It should fly. You should see it go down. It does. See how it goes down? It was at 100 feet and it's going back down to 43 feet. You should see it here too. There's it at 100 feet, dropping down to 43 feet. Also worth noting, the drone will be facing that second rotary once it reaches that marker. Okay, so let's move on to actual camera commands, both to configure the camera as well as to take video and images.